How's things going in Bement right now?
Things are going really well. It was exciting yesterday at the end of the day. We had a pep assembly. We celebrated our boys' high school cross country team going to sectionals this weekend. We celebrated our seventh grade girls basketball team. They played in our conference tournament championship game last night. They just couldn't quite pull out the win, but they made it to the championship game. And then we also celebrated our high school girls volleyball team who played for the regional championship last night, and they did win. So they play again on Monday in the sectionals. So a lot to celebrate, a lot going on.
How exciting. Very good. Very good. So, Mrs. Vogt, let's talk a little bit. I know that it's school report card time, and while you can't dive into the specifics of the report card, there's probably a couple of reasons for that. Let's talk about it because, one, it's embargoed until Monday, from what I understand. But also, like, there's been a lot of like back and forth on, is this data right? Is this the correct data set? Are these the actual numbers? What's going on here, Mrs. Vogt?
Seth, if I could answer that question, I would make a lot of people happy if I could tell them really what was.
From your perspective, what is happening then?
So I feel like this is something we go through every year where the initial data comes out and then it gets pulled back and, oh, sorry, we miscalculated. And then it gets sent out again. And then, well, hang on a second, it might not all be correct. So my understanding is there are data points that are being calculated a little bit differently this year. It's almost like going back to remember the days of No Child Left Behind, where it was districts had to meet certain benchmarks every year in order to be considered making progress. And I feel like we got away from that meeting the benchmark target. And now that's what it feels like the report card has gone back to is not necessarily that true, pure, hey, how did you do this year compared to last year? But, let's pull all of these factors in and see, are you meeting this certain criteria? And Seth, it's almost like, the kids playing, maybe 2-on-2 basketball, and all of a sudden somebody changes the rules in the middle of the game and the other person's like, hey, I didn't know we were playing. Like, that's what the school report card feels like is, if you could just tell me the rules up front, then I'll know what to expect. But it feels like the rules change as we go. And so it's frustrating because to sit down and talk with my building principals and say, here are some areas where we need to work. And then, oh, never mind. They actually changed that. So it's lack of trust. And when you don't have trust, it's hard to move forward.
It's my absolute favorite, getting some like you and your peers on the topic of the frustrations of the state of Illinois, because just the stuff you guys come up with is fantastic. It's like changing the rules in the middle of a basketball game. That's classic. So Mrs. Vogt, when it comes to that, I mean, when you're able to put this out there on Monday, like, how confident are you that what you're going to tell your community and what you're going to be able to promote about your district is going to be accurate?
I feel like it's as accurate as it can be. In a situation like this, if it were me calculating the data, if it was me presenting it, I would have a little bit more concern. But this is information I've been given, and I will share the information that's been given. I'm proud of our district. I'm proud of what we will report. But Seth, if something comes back and it's not accurate, I guess that's where I have that peace of mind of saying, hey, thanks for catching that. I'll let the powers that be know. So, for me, this is levy time of year. So I'm working on our levy and thinking about what is reasonable, because when I work on a levy, I'm asking the taxpayers to give the school money. And so that's where I feel like that's an area where I do have a bit of control, and I can control that narrative to say, here's what we're asking for, here's why we're asking for it, and here's how we're going to use the dollars. But when it comes to the state report card, there are just so many. I feel like it's an abstract report that most people don't understand. We do our best to tell our story. and that's the most I can hope for, is that people accept that I'm relaying the story that the state has provided.
So what is in the report card there, Mrs. Vogt? I know you can't tell us what, like, the specifics of the data and all that, but what is in the report card? Why is this so important to schools?
Well, I think as educators, we naturally have that mindset of that pass fail mindset. We've either been successful or we haven't. And if we haven't been successful, then we need to fix it. And Seth, we're in the business of educating people, and people aren't perfect. And I think we lose sight of that. So for this report card, things that I'm not really worried about. It tells me how many schools I have in my district. Great. There's no denying how many schools I have in my district. But then it also takes into, reports out graduation rates, student mobility, district finances, chronic absenteeism, our retention rate of staff. And then, so you go through the academic progress, there's an equity journey, the district environment. So quite a few of these data points are what I consider a snapshot in time. So there's the 5 essentials survey that parents are asked to complete, middle school, high school students are asked to complete, teachers are asked to complete. That's one survey. It's our state testing. There's one test on any given day. So it takes all of these random snapshots throughout the school year and puts them all together and tries to paint this picture of, this is what our school is like all day, every day. Some of it I feel like is captured accurately, but I don't feel like all of it is, if that makes sense.
Yeah, sure. Now, when it comes to your report card specifically, is there data from last year to this year you're keeping an eye on, and you want to you're observe, like, watching intently to see how you did?
Yes, absolutely. So I feel like the 2 primary subject areas that get reported are English language arts and math. Science has joined the party here in the last few years, so we are starting to see some historical data on the science testing. But if a kiddo can't read, then that has an impact on their whole life. And so I'm just trying to make sure that we're moving forward and maintaining progress in those areas of reading and math instruction throughout the district.
Mm-hmm. I've heard a little bit about true absent. What is it? Like the what's that?
The truancy.
Yeah. Are you seeing much of that in Bement schools?
We have, and we are so fortunate. We're part of the Macon Pyatt ROE, and they have a new truant officer started last school year, who's very responsive and supportive. And truancy isn't something unique to Bement. It is happening across the board. And Seth, I think one of the reasons for that is when we were all shut down 3 years ago, and then 2 years ago, there was that hybrid, some people learning from home, some people coming to school wearing masks. I think for some students, they got comfortable at home, and a traditional school setting is not a place where they feel they can be successful. But our the structure of school hasn't changed. I mean, think about it. Our school calendar is still based on the agriculture needs from the 1800s. We don't have families of 10 that the kids all have to help with spring planting and fall harvest anymore. But that's how our school calendar is still built.
Mm-hmm. Well, Mrs. Vogt, as it relates to the report card, anything else to mention that we haven't touched on you want to put out there for us?
I feel comfortable with what we are going to present this year, and I don't want to give an impression to make it sound like we don't have room to grow. Everyone every year has room to grow, and so we're going to keep doing what we're doing well, and then make improvements where we can.
Well, Mrs. Vogt, I'll tell you what, let's take a time out here, come back with some more. That's Mrs. Mary Vogt. She is the superintendent of Bement Schools, our guest on the phone. More to come with her on The Morning Show.
WHOW. An item today. Let's check the markets now on the RFD Radio Network. I'm Jim Taylor. Corn slightly higher, beans double-digit higher, wheat trading lower. December corn up 3.5, 482 3/4. March corn up 3 1/4, 496 1/2. May corn 504 1/2, up 3 1/4. November beans up 14 3/4, 1294 1/4. January beans up 15 1/2, 1315 3/4. March beans up 15 1/2, 1329 1/4. December wheat 575 3/4, down 3 3/4. March wheat down 3 1/4, 602 3/4. December bean meal 442.10, that's up 12.60. December bean oil 51.82, up 8 cents. Livestock market at this hour: November feeders 235.35, down to $1.15. October live cattle 182.65, up 95 cents. December lean hog 68.72, up a dime. Energy market at this hour: December crude oil up 73 cents, 83.94. Jim Taylor, RFD Radio.
ServPro reminds youngsters who will be trick-or-treating this Halloween to visit only well-lighted houses. If there's no sidewalk, walk on the left-hand side of the road or street, facing traffic. Don't cut across lawns or go between parked cars. This message, wishing you a safe and happy Halloween, comes from ServPro, your fire and water restoration specialist, like it never happened.
Paul Scarron, CEO of Warner Hospital and Health Services in Clinton. With October being Breast Cancer Awareness Month, our state-of-the-art 3D mammo machine can help detect early cancer. Find out details by clicking our icon at DeWittDailyNews.com.
For the latest in Central Illinois agricultural news, visit IllinoisFarmRadio.com. Get updated information on markets, weather, ag news, local interviews with NAFB farm broadcaster Jared White, and much, much more. All at IllinoisFarmRadio.com.
Your friend in Central Illinois, WHOW.
Top of the morning. Thanks for being with us. I'm your host today, Seth Lawrence. The WHOW Morning Show streams to Facebook and YouTube, brought to you by Peterson Insurance, your Pekin Insurance agent in Clinton. Mrs. Mary Vogt is the superintendent of Bement Schools, my guest on the phone. And Mrs. Vogt, you mentioned there, as we were talking about the report card, it is levy time. So how's the levy look for Bement Schools?
The levy is looking good. We should not be asking for anything that would cause our tax rate for the taxpayers to change. I think sometimes that can be a little bit misleading because what the state requires is if we are going to levy 5% or more in funds than we did the previous year, then we need to have what's called a truth in taxation hearing. Levies are based off of the EAV, Equalized Assessed Valuation on Property, and what I'm getting from Piatt and Champaign counties, the two counties our district is in, is that our EAV is going up between 6 and 7%. Therefore, what I'm going to ask for will also go up in that 6% range, but that doesn't mean taxes are going up. And I think sometimes people misunderstand that and think, oh, they're asking for 6% more, therefore my taxes are going up. No, the taxes are going to stay the same. The way I try to explain it is if I go through, Seth, do you remember when we were kids, like the Sears Christmas Wish catalog, and like you'd go through and circle all the toys you wanted? Like if I went through and circled every single toy I wanted for Christmas, I'm asking for all those toys, but that's not realistic. I'm only going to get what my parents have budgeted, what they have said, this is what Mary gets for Christmas this year. Or I could go through and circle one item in that, and my parents think, hey, she only wants that one thing. So great, we're coming in way under budget on Mary, and they're not going to buy me anything extra. So what happens with the levy and the money that districts ask for, I could ask for $1 billion, Seth. I really could. I could ask for $1 billion. But I'm only going to get what is allowed to this district. Likewise, if I ask for $5 and I'm allowed $1 million, I'm only going to get the $5 that I asked for.
Sure. Well, Mrs. Vogt, as it relates to the levy and how it compares to years past, how does it compare to years past?
You know, we are right in line keeping what we're asking the taxpayers. It's going to be consistent. They should not see a change in what they pay. But like I said, we are seeing a little bit of an increase in each of our counties, so we'll be able to ask for just a little bit more money without it impacting the taxpayers.
There you go. So that's always good to hear. Mrs. Vogt, anything else on the levy or the budget in Bement? How's the budget looking, I guess?
The budget is looking good. We're in line with what we had projected. I do have on my November board agenda a request for the board to approve applying for the school maintenance grant. That's a $50,000 grant from the state that then requires that districts also chip in $50,000. So we do have a chimney that needs repaired, and that should help the budget with the state chipping in that $50,000 that was not originally accounted for.
Very good. Very good. So, Mrs. Vogt, as it relates to just kind of things you need to address, whether it's facilities, like those sorts of things, like, is there anything kind of coming up for Bement schools that you're budgeting for and preparing for?
We are going to, also at our November meeting, we have an intent to sell bonds on the agenda. And Seth, the way that works is we have a bond that is coming due. It's going to fall off of our bond payment schedule, and so the reason we're issuing bonds is that, again, we'll keep what the taxpayers are paying the same. It won't go up, won't go down, but it will allow the district to add funds to our working cash fund. A topic that we've talked about at our board meetings has been the potential of air conditioning our main gym. Right now, we have air conditioning, just window units in the classrooms and common areas throughout the building, but our main gym is not air conditioned, which beginning of this year with that extreme heat, we lost instruction time because we couldn't send the kids outside and we couldn't use the gym. So, we sent them to a computer lab to keep their time occupied, which is not ideal at all. So that's a big project that, if we're able to sell these bonds, then the board gets the final say in how those funds are used. But my hope is here within the next couple of years we can have our gym air conditioned.
Yeah, very good. That'd be really nice. And you said you hold graduation in there?
We do. We hold graduation there. We hold our 8th grade honors night is held in there. Any summer camps, we have to do summer camps in Cerro Gordo, which, yes, we already co-op sports, but Bement hosts all of the middle school sports. We can't do any middle school summer camps in our facility because of the heat in the gym.
Yeah, understandable. Very good. Well, Mrs. Vogt, we look forward to that, and I'm sure we'll be talking budget more as we go down the road and those sorts of things. The 1 cent sales tax, Mrs. Vogt, I know that's in Piatt County, and I venture a guess that Bement gets a very small portion of that. But how far does that go in helping you save for things like air conditioning in your gym?
What I find with that 1 cent sales tax, I use it for things like we had lettering on the outside of our gym. The lettering is 50 years old. Some of it started breaking. So surprisingly, it's going to cost around $2,000 to replace gym lettering. I thought it would be like $500. Boy, was I wrong. So those unexpected projects that we need to address throughout the year, I find that's where I use that 1% money, because it's not really such a significant amount. Like it would take me several years to save up for a big project.
Interesting. Yeah, and with that small of that's minimal dollars coming in, certainly makes sense. Very good. Well, Mrs. Vogt, let's wrap it up here this morning. Let's talk. I know that you did a joint substitute teacher recruiting event with one of your peers. What'd you do? How about this?
So we had a recruiting evening in Cerro Gordo a couple of weeks ago. And what Dr. Widener at Cerro Gordo and I are doing is bringing the ROE in. We had the event on our high school volleyball senior night when it was in Cerro Gordo. We will have an event here in Bement on Thursday, November 9th at one of our middle school boys basketball games. And what we're trying to encourage people to do is sign up to sub. We have Dee Williams from our local regional office of education joining us. She has all of the paperwork necessary for people to complete right there on the spot. And then, Seth, I'm not sure if this is something that most people in the public are aware of, but in order to be a substitute, it can cost up to $200 to get all of the licensure and physical and just all of the requirements needed in order to be a qualified sub. So what Dr. Widener and I are offering is anyone who signs up at one of our recruiting events, we will reimburse them up to that $200 once they sub in one of our districts for 5 days.
Well, that's nice of you, Mrs. Vogt.
Well, I think, again, in education, we do things backwards, Seth. And so, the sub shortage that we have, and then to tell people, oh, by the way, in order to work for us, you actually need to pay $200 up front. It's so backwards. So backwards.
Yeah, it is. Absolutely. And of course, that this is an ongoing issue, not just in Piatt County, but across the area. And, when you're battling, schools are kind of trying to one up each other, it feels like, in this conversation of, not only substitutes, but teachers and those sorts of things. It's like, what can we do to attract, substitutes and teachers that other districts aren't doing? So there's kind of that, like I said, one-upsmanship, if you will.
Yes. And, you think about it in the business world, you have kids going out and having paid internships. Businesses will pay moving costs. Just there are so many incentives in professions outside of education that traditionally education has not had to. I mean, Seth, when I started as a building principal, I would get over 200 applicants for a teaching job. Now we're lucky to get 5.
You would not believe the amount of times I hear that, Dr. or Mrs. Vogt. You would not believe it. It's. I think if I hear that once a month, that's probably not a stretch. So, it's crazy. It's just crazy. Well, Mrs. Vogt, where do folks go to learn about becoming a substitute or a teacher in Bement schools?
www.bement.k12.il.us.
And again, that is Mrs. Mary Vogt. She is the superintendent of Bement Schools. Mrs. Vogt, always good to have you on the program. We appreciate that very much. The morning show streams to Facebook and YouTube, brought to you by Peterson Insurance, your Pekin Insurance agents in Clinton. Network news comes your way next on the morning show.